February 19th, 6 p.m. I'm calling to order the regular monthly scheduled Board of Directors meeting for the Clear Creek Community Services District. Would all please rise, the pledge of allegiance. Starting at Marvin, would you please lead us in that today?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Starting with roll call, we just start down here.
Terry Lincoln.
Logan Johnston.
Scott McVeigh.
Beverly Fisher. Pam Beaver.
Paul Kelly, General Manager, Admin Assistant, not able to be here this evening, so I will try to keep good notes.
I see our water treatment plant operator, Mr. Paul Mesa, in attendance, and our county supervisor, Mr. Kellstrom. Thank you. We're going to be moving into open time, but before we do that, I made a few mistakes last week, and I need to kind of correct them. One was I allowed someone to come up and speak during open time when it was actually in the agenda, and I should have asked them to wait. I was trying to be nice, so they didn't want to stay the whole meeting, but that was a mistake of mine. Okay, and I apologize to our district manager in private, but I apologize to him again in public. It happened in public, and he kind of got raked over the coals. So I apologize for that. Now, during open time, pursuant to Government Code 54950, persons wishing to address the Board of Directors on matters not listed on the agenda should notify the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. To speak at this time or for any item listed on the agenda, raise your hand. And when recognized by the chair, proceed to the podium and address the board. So if it's something that's on the agenda, we're going to ask you to wait until that item comes up, okay? The other thing we want to be careful of is Brown Act violations. When a person comes to open time and speaks, we should sit there and just quietly let them say what they want to say. So, and I know prior to being on the board, I had the Brown Act violated against me a few times by prior board members. So we're going to endeavor to do things a little more accurately. And to that effect, I'd like to thank our general manager for his sending out the Roberts Rules, okay, which is basically just a guideline on how meetings should go and whatnot. And I hope you guys all had a chance to read that and you can kind of follow through with it. I'm assuming no one has approached you for open time, so I'll ask, is there anybody who wants to bring up something that's not on the agenda at this time? You're welcome to. Oh, all right, and we'll move on with the consent agenda. Meetings first, minutes, I'm sorry. Consent agenda.
Through the chair, we've got a couple little edits near the back page here. Let's see that I've got noted, making sure that we can call people that speak, customers. I believe that's it. Are there any others on the minutes?
I have just one clarification. I could be mistaken, but with that leak that we had on Olinda, and it says in the minutes that it only affected one customer, but I thought there were several customers that it affected. It's the last page of the minutes, under item 10. Was it just affected more if we turned it off, if that's what the issue was?
Yeah, I don't recall specifically. I just know that the repair was done. There would have been multiple turned off if a certain valve had been turned off, but they decided to go and just fix the one service line that impacted one customer.
Okay. So when they turned it off, though, it turned off several people's. Okay, that's probably what it was. Okay.
Any other questions on the minutes? Corrections, anything? No. Is there anything on the consent agenda that any board member would like to have pulled out to discuss further later? No?
To the chair, I would just note on the next next couple items under bills paid, there are some bills and invoices that have been noted in there, so I thought,
Right.
if you would like to bring those up.
I intended to shortly.
Okay.
So, moving on to bills paid, then we have just the printout of the transaction detail account. Does show quite a big minus on there, but we'll deal with that. First bills, I know most of these will be by Director Figis and I, because we were the ones that were signing in the bills. Go ahead.
I have a question on the transaction.
Go right
detail.
ahead, let's go back to that then.
On page 1 of the transaction detail, it's under Rick Castorini, but it could, it could pertain to any retiree. Do we have any checks and balances, requiring semi-annual notification that what they're paying out when we reimburse them for their, medical?
Yeah, so, when rates and things change in January, they get a letter that says what the amounts are.
But do they notify us? Because you could change it if you wanted to a lesser amount without notifying us. That's what my,
I'm not sure that there's any, retiree that notifies us. So in other words, we get from CalPERS Health the list of roster of who's on there and what their payments are and what their costs are. That's what we use for the reimbursement.
so I thought Rick's was different.
It is different, that one's different. That one is specifically, I believe it was whenever he retired, the board said he could get his OPEB monies back. And then as long as the employees were okay with it, they went to the employees. From what we gathered, there was, the employees approved it. And then, so he was put on a schedule of getting his monies returned. So that's what this particular check is on that, is his money being returned. Obviously, when we implemented the OPEB fix, we returned all of the money for those that were active all at once.
Oh, so this isn't payment for his medical? Okay, okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, I probably misheard the first part of your question, so.
No, okay, no, if it's not his medical, then, okay.
Any other questions on the transaction? No, I do have one that came to mind, in reference to that, and the fact that we have a number of retirees who are collecting, medical from us. Is there a mechanism where they report when that retiree or spouse or whatever passes away? How does the district know when that happens?
That runs through the CalPERS medical. In other words, they handle that notification. I believe they've told us that they usually find out within 15 days to 30 days of any change. Death, modification, move to Medicare. Last year,
Right.
during the middle of the year, there were some that moved to Medicare. And we then received from CalPERS Medical that notification.
Excellent, thank you. Then we'll move on to.
I had
go right
one
ahead.
quick thing. Brown Plumbing, assess skeptic.
Septic,
Septic, yeah.
they spelled it wrong.
So it's a typo. An assessment was $10,566.
Wrong line.
Oh,
Your eyes are
my eyes are bad. Dirty. God. I apologize, people.
Welcome
No.
over the hill.
Well, excavating makes way more sense for 10.5.
That's what happens when
I
you turn
apologize,
30.
Paul, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew I read the skeptic part.
Anything else? That's a good-
Yes, Action or Excavating, are we using them again?
That's a good question.
Well, yes, we do. We've used Sunrise, we've used Davis, and we have used Axner when they were the only ones that were able to come. And in this case, this was on Strawberry Lane, I believe it was, and we needed the excavator and a couple of employees.
We'll touch bases on that again later when we're looking to adjust some things. And anybody else on the transaction detail? No? Okay, let's go to the invoices that were flagged. And the first one, did you want to speak on that, or do you want me to?
Okay.
All right, excuse me a second, I'm gonna dig out my notes. I have a whole bunch of notes. Did I hide them? Basically, I wanted to deal with Mason. He's the very first individual on the list, and if I remember my notes. There was an issue with, comparing line 1, we had January 2nd, and then line 4, January 6th. I noted that the mileage only changed by like 108 miles for that particular unit. And yet we used well over 13 gallons of gas, so about 8 miles per gallon on that particular unit for that time frame. I'm understanding that lines 2 and 3 were diesel fuel for the backhoe, but they were 2 fill-ups that same day. Okay, and they ran almost 24 gallons. So I was just wondering, if those were accurate. It looked a little funny, was all.
Well, the 2 Phillips were within 15 minutes of one another.
Oh, you're right, the diesel, the 2 fill-ups.
So that just throws up red flags for us when we see that. And it says backhoe,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's like, was one our backhoe and one was a rented backhoe? Did we do that?
I don't know about that, but, yeah, those have been noted and they've been given to, the distribution supervisor.
So you'll tell us something next time, please.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't heard anything specifically related to those 2 particular, fuel ups. But they have been given to us,
Thank you. Next invoice, there's I think 3 or 4 of them from Ryan Herpel Flow Solutions. They were flagged by me. Basically, we were charged, all these items were ordered, from what I understand, at the same time, but were individually charged freight. The first one was a $57 part, and we got charged $37 freight. And then we had another one that was a $26 part and $37 freight. And then a couple more like that. And freight on one of them was $200 and some dollars. Now, I understand that. I'm just wondering if we can't, if it's an emergent situation, I understand that. But otherwise, I hate to see us spending money on individual little parts like that and considering what they're charging for freight.
Yeah, the concern was they were all ordered on the same day,
Right.
so are they doing funny things to us,
Yeah.
is the question.
Yeah, and they're also, at least on these, all shipped on the same day.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I noted that. I don't have an answer for you on anything other than noting, both of those items.
Well, could we ask
Yeah, the water treatment plant.
Could we ask Bill, were these big ticket items, Bill, so they couldn't be shipped together?
I believe they're shipped out of different warehouses. And it's hard to find material, or it's getting hard to find, it's Kynar or PVDF,
Okay.
polyvinyl fluoride.
I see that, some out of Chicago, one out of Philly.
That would be the reason then.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
the first 2 came from the same warehouse, but definitely the third one, the large one, came from, Pennsylvania.
So Bill, stuff like this, the only place we can get it is from this company?
It's the cheapest place.
Okay, thank you.
The shipping on one of the items cost more than the actual part.
Yeah,
So shipping included is still the cheapest place, Bill? Cause that's pretty ridiculous, $38 shipping on a
$26 part.
okay, I think we've got our answer answers there. Moving on to the next one, and that was NorCal Glove. Did you wanna handle this one?
Nope, cause I didn't flag it.
Okay, I did flag it, and, I was wondering why hooded sweatshirts were safety equipment. We purchased 2 of them at $50 a piece. One medium, one extra large.
Well, those are, high vis. At least the first, which one?
They're both lime colored.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there wasn't some orange and yellow vest that could be thrown over the top, which would be even more visible. Standard safety.
yeah. I mean, really, everybody has a vest. Obviously, just like the coveralls, in this case, it was thought that, having the added protection of a lime colored sweatshirt would be helpful as well. So that's why it was.
My only concern with that is the distribution, overran their budget. And it would have been nice to see some effort. The next one was from the same company, and it was the Tyvek coverall, $160. Is that a, one-time use?
Well, it's limited use, but, there are OSHA requirements when you're in a ditch and you're, cutting concrete saw, so, concrete pipe. So
Okay,
that's really what that is.
so we didn't have the other items prior to this then?
Oh, we had them, but they worn out.
Okay. Moving on to, I-5 rents, this was a back trailer rental. Do we carry 5-gallon gas containers that we can use at a job site? Or, and the reason this one is flagged, I see that upon returning the unit, we were charged for 6.4 gallons of diesel at $8.50 a gallon. I'm wondering if we could have had a 5-gallon or whatever, and simply topped it off ourselves, saving us. It's a small amount of money, but considering how many times we have rented a back trailer, it would add up.
Yeah. The rental equipment people, but I think having extra, gas or diesel containers would be a good idea. I actually have some that I'll give the district just because I had to go to getting some that a lady could handle, because I can't handle the other ones. But, so I have ones that I'm not using anymore, so I'll bring them over. If you wanna use them, fine, but I agree, if we need to carry a little extra.
Is there any safety issue with that?
I think usually what happens is when they can, they take it to the fueling station to fuel it there instead of using the, gas cans, just for that very reason, just concerned, making sure we aren't doing anything that's not safe. I don't know in this particular case, it may have been that we were finally getting it back to them at 4:30 and they just had to get it back to them instead of getting another day's worth of charge, and the fuel was a offset versus getting a full day's charge.
I understand.
I can't believe that they think that, everybody here, I would bet you everybody in this room uses, gas or diesel, then it's a safety issue.
Well, when you're storing fuel cans like that, it's a storage issue, so we would probably have to have a flammable materials cabinet, which I don't know if we do or don't right now, but those aren't cheap either. We just bought one, small one for our log scalers, and a 3-foot by 3-foot was $1,500 just for the cabinet. So anyway, that's
Okay.
not a deterrent,
That's a good answer.
but
Yeah.
they're not cheap.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on, I flagged this one also, Avis, and it didn't really indicate too much what it was, something about Happy Valley Repair, but I couldn't figure out if was this parts or rental equipment or something?
excavate.
Oh, Davis,
Davis.
sorry.
Excavate for water main repair.
Yeah, so, this was Strawberry Lane, this was, on a, I think this was either New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, so their distribution supervisor found somebody to get some help, basically.
So they rented, what, a mini excavator or something, had it hauled out?
Yeah, they brought out, primarily, they brought out a couple of employees and their excavator.
Because I noticed that in the invoices that we paid, Action over $10,000 to do the job.
Yeah, it was a 2.5
So I
day
wasn't
job,
sure why
so-
we were renting equipment yet paying them when they could have brought their own.
These folks primarily just came out for a short period of time when there was a need for employees to be on site. We were short employees.
And Ashner was there 2 days later.
Okay. Moving on, there was the Action invoice, so we talked about that. We want to talk about the IRS, it was.
I didn't flag it, so you
Yeah, I
flagged it.
know. I'm gonna skip it. It looks like, an estimate was made and we were short by a couple of bucks was all. We
Well,
paid a $2.37 penalty.
yeah, I mean, this is, first of all, just for tax period March 31st, 2022.
Right.
So this is 3 years ago. As you know, their quarterly submission of Form 941 is required by the IRS. And after months and months of looking for the issues, our bookkeeper accountant finally found it and found that the previous payroll person in 2022 did not submit everything that was needed. So this has just been a catch up, and it looks like we're all caught up.
Very good. Am I handling the next one too, Blue Star?
No, yeah, so I had sent, I would assume he flagged it because we were just questioning the 469, but I know I had sent you some information, so was there any follow-up from you at all?
No, I haven't heard anything from Blue Star Gas. We contacted them about the price per unit, and if there was any like government rate or purchase, I haven't heard any of that.
Okay.
But yeah, this one, I think you brought a copy into my office and just said, hey, can we check on that? So
Yeah.
I thought I would have an answer by the time we showed up on the meeting. But I don't.
Anything else on payables?
I have a question on all of these.
Okay.
Why if you're reviewing them and Paul's here, are we reviewing them again with the group? Rather than you guys review them, if there's something questionable, then flag it and bring it to the board to discuss. But to me, these are kind of a waste of time to go over them when you could have asked Paul when you were reviewing them, when you were signing checks.
Possibly, I understand that. In response to that, it's an attempt to be transparent with the board and with the community so that you have a chance to see.
Well, if we're gonna do these, why aren't we doing all of them if we're being transparent? We rather than you guys come in and review them and then flag them and we have to discuss them again, then why don't we just do all of those in a special meeting or whatever and do them all?
I think that would take too much time, and if you chose to review them yourself, they would be available for you to come in on your own time. These are things that we had questions about.
Right, he was right there. You asked him then and now you're asking him again. It seems like a waste of.
Actually, I did not ask him for most of them.
Well, maybe you should have, and then a lot of those would have been responded to.
Fair enough. You got a comment?
So just to clarify a little bit, sometimes Paul's not always here,
Right.
sometimes we ask Melissa, but our intent when we do flag some of these is that we did wanna bring it to the whole board. This time around, there was a little too many, and I agree, I agree with
Okay.
that. But there are things like, if Blue Star Gas for, I don't know what you guys are paying for your propane, but the district is paying $4.69 a gallon. So my company, I would be charged $5 something a gallon. So I'm gonna go out and see if I can't find something a little cheaper, which I have, a lot cheaper, $2 a gallon cheaper. So, and about 25 cheaper than Blue Star. So that's something that we can save, you know, a couple $100, $300 every time we fill up a propane tank. I think some of it, we just wanted you guys to see some of these expenditures and what's going on. Yes, we can ask him when he's available, he's not always available, so we'll do a better job.
Yeah, I just think it's, you know, heck, there's 15 of them that you guys flagged this time, I think it's, you
Really,
know,
that many?
yeah.
Well, the flow thing was 4 or 5.
Well,
Okay.
I, in some respects, I agree with you, Terry, but in the other respects, because sometimes I review them, this was the process where we got down the AT&T bill and also the different PG&E bills, so I think that it is beneficial. Maybe not to have as many, but I think to have us talk about it is important.
Well, I think if they're out of line, then we should talk about them. But if they're just normal, everyday things like, you know, fuel that they're putting in vehicles, you should talk to Paul, talk to Megan, whatever, you know, whoever's in charge of that, and find out at that time. And, you know, it just seems like a waste of time to go through all of these.
How do you feel about that?
I think there was, probably 80 payables that you guys reviewed,
Yeah.
15 that got thrown into this. 5 that were tied to the flow. That's its own issue. I think realistically, we had discussed 10. 10 invoices. I don't think it's totally unreasonable. I think we got a little carried away, but to Terry's point, the fuel, to me, that's kind of a non-issue now because Mason's not even here anymore. We're looking back at December, Mason's now gone. Not that that's not an issue, the discrepancy, but he can't even answer for that
I agree.
at this point.
My concern with that is the distribution supervisor reviewing those, or is there an opportunity for some training?
Well, to bring that up here, she's not here to respond now. You should have asked Kim at the time and had it responded to.
Actually, I did take it to he and Morgan.
Okay, and,
Okay. But it was a transparency thing.
well,
All right, I understand your point.
yeah.
We'll be more careful. Any other questions on payables?
I move that did we do the P and L?
No, we haven't done the check register, payroll, and then activity reports.
I do want to just mention though, when we get to these activity reports, you know, just because we're later able to look at the full FY '24 budget to actual and the FY '25 6-month budget to actual. As I've reported for the last 6 months, we've been behind in getting these activity reports. Primarily because of the conversion of the CUSI system, the change over to the revenue being accrual and trying to get that matched up, and also with the help of J.L. Martin, getting those journal entries from the FY '22 audit rolling through all of the different years, which it's still working on. So I just want to point out to you that what you're going to see on item 6D is a collapsation of all of these here. And though if you look at them, you might see like there's a whole bunch of negatives at the bottom line on some of these. But you know, July is a good example of it's actually $25,862 positive because because there's a expense to the backwash pond grant.
Yeah.
It's like 32,000. That's covered by, that grant anticipation note. Same thing with August, it's actually a positive 50,000. September is actually a positive 52,000. So again, just pointing out to these because when you see it on item 6D, you're gonna say, why is it that we're positive there? Because it all actually balances out as you get there. October, there is actually a negative 55,000. November, there's a positive 14,000. And December, there's a negative 10,000. So just as an example. The other thing too, just kind of the first time the public's seeing these, we have, and it'll obviously be more broken out when we get to items 6C and D, but you know, we really struggled with identifying reimbursements from the state or federal government for a grant, and they were showing up initially in revenue, and we know that we get billed by LAFCO and others based on our revenue, so that's not really revenue, that's reimbursement. So what our CPA has suggested is that we keep the expenses in the 8,000 range under grant expenses, and then when we get a reimbursement, we actually negative out that expense. In other words, if you got an expense of $100,000 and you get reimbursed for $100,000, you just keep it in that expense side. You don't put it in the revenue and inflate your revenue.
Right.
So that's why if you look at, I think it's not till January, and those are unreconciled, but if you look at page 3, you'll see a negative $1,323,147,000. That's when, after 8.5 months, we finally got money from Cal OES FEMA.
Right.
Now, we've turned around and paid down our CAC. Again, all of these activity reports have not been in your, on your agenda. We felt like we needed to have them at least here, recognizing that you're gonna see them all consolidated in item 6B.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I did notice that we had some, once you pulled up the grant money, that there were some good positive flows. But of course, we realized that there were regulatory fees or insurance fees are paid once a year, so you have an ebb and flow to your income and expenses.
And again, this is why it's normally, right, at your August meeting, you would have had the July activity report. And then the next month, you had another 1 month activity report. Now you're getting all 6 activity reports, 7 actually, and then you're getting them all consolidated, which is a much better view under the regular calendar.
Correct. Okay, any questions on payroll before we move on? No? Okay. Any questions then on the activity reports, the July through December? And you said that January's was not reconciled yet?
Right.
We may want to hold off on that. Anybody? Questions? No? Well, and that completes the consent agenda. If someone would care to make a motion?
Question,
Go ahead.
do you want us to pull out January if it's unreconciled?
Well, two things. One, I put it in here just because I wanted us to get used to finally getting previous month's activity report. Yes, so I would suggest the motion be to approve the consent calendar, minutes as amended, and all the activity reports through 2024. That way, January.
I move we accept the minutes as amended, up through, December of 2024. Is that enough?
For the
The
activity?
consent agenda.
And the consent agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the amendments to the minutes through December of 2024. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to old new business. Turning it back to our general manager.
Mr. Chair, we'd like to keep this USBR report of account reconciliation on here, even though nothing to report on the account reconciliation. As I reported last month, Don Bader retired mid-December. Elizabeth Hadley has now been appointed to be the area manager. I've invited her to speak. She is tentatively scheduled to be here at our April meeting. There is a report on the Bureau's Mid-Pacific Water Users Conference in my report and the general manager report, so I'm not going to necessarily touch on that. There's also Director Ficus's report at the end of this as well. But one of the things that they reported at that conference is that the critical year determination was going to happen on February 15th. Obviously, not a critical year since we've had a lot of rain. We did communicate as they're kind of tired of hearing, why are you, sending so much water out, especially when we had a dry January, a dry water January, for those that may think dry January means something else. And then obviously we've had a very wet past couple of weeks, but tomorrow is their scheduled day to release their initial allocation for water year 2026. So I expect sometime in the next few days we'll receive that. We'll also receive our updated rate sheet, which will then give us an opportunity to have a finance committee sometime in March to talk about usage rates, potentially for March meeting.
Very good. Any questions? Oh, moving on to 6B. At the last meeting, we attempted to create an ad hoc committee and we kind of botched it, so we revisited this. I think what we need to do, since our general manager has proposed that we form an ad hoc committee, is that we have a motion first to form an ad hoc committee and proceed from there.
I would like to make a motion to create an ad hoc committee and appoint 2 members.
All right, do we have a motion to create an ad hoc committee? Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Do we have a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. So we're gonna form an ad hoc committee.
And I am going to read that motion for the purpose of meeting with Centerville representatives to renegotiate the contract for the limited time of when until a contract is created, or December, whichever is sooner, right?
Correct.
That's exactly what I
That was in the original,
That's what I
what we
heard.
were working on, yes. Thank you for that correction.
Those are just criteria for the ad hoc.
Okay, so we need 2 members. I'd like to first ask, is there anybody who, for time constraints or any other reason, cannot serve on that committee? You 2, all right, fair enough. So then we take a look at what the needs are for the committee. So to form an ad hoc committee and best serve the interests of our district, the community.
And I would just say to the chair that our admin policies are silent on how to put members on the committee. There is a diversity of results. If you Google this to say how should it be done, in some cases the chair's prerogative, in some cases, as our attorney has said, the chair can only do what the board says that he can do or she can do. Or there's what we did last time, which we had a recommendation of 2 members and the board took that. So my suggestion is once you appoint somebody, you tell me how it is that you expect to appoint people, the board or the chair, and then we're gonna go back and put that in our admin policy.
Yeah, I wanted to add that we do need to, just to prevent any misunderstandings in the future, adopt something into our admin policy that says this is how it will be done in the future.
Well, in previous years, if I'm not incorrect, it was a matter of who wants to be on the committee and who has that interest. and then people would volunteer for it.
That's quite possible.
And I would just say, through the chair, if you don't mind, that is the practice really of our standing committees. We have 3 standing committees, you're interested, the chair then appoints you, that's been the practice. Ad hoc committees, again, you can find places where, agencies, you do a motion to create it, the chair sees who's interested and who's available and picks it. Or you have, like we did last time, you can see it in our minutes, you had a director that recommended 2 members of the board, and everybody said, okay, and that's what happened. And
Right,
That's
so
just as,
now we're trying to fix what we did.
Yeah.
And do it right is all. So, of the 3 of us, is there interest, by all 3 of us to be on that committee?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I am interested also. So, how do we want to proceed?
Well, they were already selected, so let them do it.
Okay, that's your opinion?
So it would be by motion, a second,
Yeah.
and then a vote.
Okay,
so, again, go ahead, Brent.
Oh, make a motion? I make a motion that Beverly and Ham be on the ad hoc committee for Centerville.
Wait, are we determining who's on the ad hoc committee right
You
now,
guys
or are we
recommend-
determining how we're going to go about doing that?
Sounds like.
One and the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So Terry makes a motion that Pam and Beverly are on the ad hoc committee to negotiate with Centerville. I will second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? It's done.
Okay, good, and so that's what we'll put into the,
Thanks.
Thank you.
that we work on.
So, yeah, for the admin, you'll come back with it being,
It's pretty simple, I think I already have a highlighted section to do that. Just so the the board knows, we've created packets, we have an expectation, our chief, plant operator's here with us as well. So we'll be the staff to the committee, the plan would be to meet with, Centerville representatives and start the process, and then we will have for you the contract and all the rest.
did you ever find out whether they preferred day or evening?
Director Fickus asked me to ask them, and I did, and I forgot to mention it before we got started. They have, it was reported to me that one member of their committee would prefer prior to 5 o'clock, and the other would prefer 5 o'clock or after. So, they're kind of mixed. So I think we probably will kind of compromise and just do something right at 5 o'clock, actually.
Moving on to 6C.
Well, to the board, as you know, we have been working hard to get the fiscal year 24, which is July 2023 through 2024, actuals to budget, so that you can see sort of the bottom line for that. We did hire Harshwall to be our auditor. They are currently working on the FY23 audit. They're working with our CPA firm to get that going. As you recall, when we signed up with them, they were going to try to get us a draft FY23 audit by March or April, and then they're going to dive right into this one and get this one done by the end of this fiscal year. Just a couple of things that to note. There's as you look through it, clearly there's for FY24. So remember, this is July of 2023 through June of 2024. Our revenues are up. As we had budgeted, and we had, especially for the FY24 budget, sort of our first budget together, we were very conservative on our revenues, and we did, kind of underplay our revenues, and we also were conservative on our expenses. So we received quite a bit from our base rate, as well as there was more water usage than we had expected. So that increased our revenue. But also recall, because it's been a long time, but in the fall of 2023, we were still receiving funds from LEWAP, or the state assistance. And if you recall, early in 2023, we really went after it hard. We had probably 100,000 plus of LEWAP monies that came to us to pay for some expired or aging and very high bills that had basically built up because the state during the pandemic said you couldn't shut anybody off for non-payment. In expenses, you can see again we had a significant number of leaks. So under repairs and maintenance and inventory and tools, that impacts it when you have an overage in your cost for repairs and maintenance. So if you look at the 4,000 range, 4,400, $190,000 versus our budget at the time, which was 110,000. So you'll recall that we had, especially in the fall of 2023, again, not unlike the fall of 2024, we have a lot of large mainline breaks. That really impacts the 40430 line item, which is under inventory and tools, because when you have a mainline break and you've got to put a new stick of pipe in, you got to put couplings on either side, you then got to go take those couplings out of our inventory, but you got to go buy more couplings to have them in inventory when you have your next leak. So that increases our costs, and as you know, post-pandemic, the costs of those things are going up, and we'll talk a little bit more about those individual costs in the next item. The other thing I want to just point out is in that 4,000 range under distribution, you might recall, in April of 2023, we budgeted $25,000 as meter replacement as part of our match for what was eventually the ARPA funds that the Board of Supervisors, and we again thank Supervisor Kelstrom and his colleagues for setting aside a portion of their ARPA funds for water districts. I believe it was $2 million, our portion was $260,000. We ordered 1,700 plus or minus transponders and registers. So these are the things that go on top of the meter, that spin, they send a signal so that you can pick it up with an electronic reader. All of those, all the ones we had prior to that had been installed about 17, 18 years ago, and so they're all expiring. So it was $310,000 plus or minus for the total order of transponders and registers. They were supposed to deliver them and invoice them over a 9-month period of time. So we figured our $50,000 match was $25,000 in FY24. We put $25,000 in our budget for this year, FY25. They all arrived in February of 2024, they were all invoiced in March of 2024, and when they had given us a proposed cost for them that was $310,000, that did not include sales tax. So we had a $74,000 bill for them. So that's why you'll see that meter replacement item all land as an expense in FY24. And again, the Finance Committee had a chance to review this. You will just see at the end that, these are not audited yet, but I think I've reported to the community multiple times that we've turned into the pink and gray and so we're $63,000 in the positive for FY24. So once it gets audited, we'll know kind of where that lands, and if it's real, and if it is, then we'll get it into reserves, or you're into your carryover reserves, or in the small business world, we call that retained earnings. And then I would just report on the balance sheet. Again, one of the things we committed to you back in early 2023 that we would start getting you balance sheets so that the community and the board kind of knows where we stand. This too is still audited or reconciled. I'll just point out to you probably the most significant one, which is page 3 of the balance sheet, year-end balance sheet, shows us that we have a long-term liability of the WIN Act being $1,099,000, or $1.1 million. The CPA is still trying to figure out how that number got there and what makes up that number, because in actuality, in this year, in FY 24, we paid off our WIN Act obligation, so we do not have any more liability to the federal government for our WIN Act. We have an internal obligation to repay our operating fund for paying off that WIN Act. The Finance Committee noted that the petty cash number is wrong. Well, our bookkeeper mentioned, well, part of that is just as the auditor is making, and the CPA are making changes to FY 23, that has these roll-in effects of having starting balances for this year. And every time they change that, this report has a little number change. But it's in our policies for $650, and that will eventually get corrected.
Any questions on our year-end or the balance sheet? Having taken a look at the year-end, I noticed a trend that's continuing in the first 6 months of this fiscal year. Distribution on their budget was minus $159,000, and I know it's following a similar pattern now for the first 6 months of the year. I would like to applaud our water treatment plant operator. He ran his budget to saving us $37,000 just for 23-24, so I applaud him for his efforts. And if I remember correctly, he's still to the good side in the first 6 months of this year. I'm wondering if we're gonna need to make adjustments. We'll be coming to adjustments for the rest of this fiscal year in a little bit. One thing on the balance sheet, I was trying to find it in this packet, was I had noticed that there was not a line item for the penalty reserves that we still should be carrying, about $33,000, and I did not see that in listed somewhere, and I hate to see it just dumped into general savings, because we had wanted to use that for future water purchases in droughts.
Yeah, I have to ask our bookkeeper accountant about that.
Right.
So repeat the question again, what was it in regards to?
The penalty reserves, I didn't see an account listing for that on the balance sheet.
Oh, okay, well, on the profit and loss budget versus actual, there's 18,000 listed in the penalties.
Right, I was looking on the balance sheets was where I was trying to find it.
Yeah,
That kind of tells us what we have in each of the accounts. And as far as myself, I would prefer that there was a separate listing, an account for that. How do the rest of you feel?
Well, sure, it has to be stated very clearly. We've got to know what it is. 10550.
I would just also point out on the balance sheet, one of the reasons why we're providing this is so we can identify things that you just mentioned, but also under the general operating fund, you have the emergency or the expansion modernization fund,
Right,
and the operational reserve fund. Again, both of these are where the designation to reserves occur, right? So 4.1% of the base rate is going into that expansion modernization. So that number is increased, so you'll see that quarterly. You'll also see it in the balance sheet for the next item, as well as the operational reserve, which is 1.8% of the usage rate.
right. Any other questions or comments on 6C?
Just for clarification, they're not the same. The balance sheet is not the same as the profit and loss, as far as the profit and loss really has it all broke down. So and your balance sheet doesn't.
Yeah, and your profit and loss is July activity that happens from July 1 of that year through June 30th of that year. So your balance sheet, though, will show, so in other words, you might have a pre-existing balance of a savings account, and then there's money added to it during that fiscal year, and then the balance sheet would show a number that would be different than what would be in that
Right.
yearly profit loss. Same thing with some of the liabilities.
Correct.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, the balance sheet is there to show you sort of your net equity, for want of a better term. In this case,
I think I found what he wanted. It's listed under 72218, penalty reserve tracking, and we have no money in it.
Right.
So we should have some money put in.
But he was questioning the balance sheet.
yeah, I mean,
I'd like to see it show up on the balance sheet.
you might recall that for FY24, we were not in a drought. So the penalties that you want to see on the balance sheet really are rolling in from the previous year from a lot of the drought penalties.
That's why it's zero.
Right. Okay, on that particular one. For
That makes
the
sense.
activity report, there
No.
were no penalties during that fiscal year. And that's why it should show up on the balance sheet, because it would show year to year where we are. Going back to I see this is listed as discussion and action. Is there some action we need to take? I didn't think so.
No.
Right. If nobody else has any comments, let's move on to 6D, and that's the 6 month, July to December P&L versus actual, and the next 6 month balance sheet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, kind of have a lot of documents here, but we've finally got to the point where we can show you from July 1 of 2024 through December 30th of 2024. So it's all of those activity reports that you saw all wrapped in. Just another quick reminder, since in the previous years, the reporting had sort of a cash on the revenue side and it had accrual on the expense side. So now we got all that resolved, so we have an accrual base all the way through. So the all the revenue here is identified as what's been billed. So for the board's benefit, there is an item or a spreadsheet, and I didn't actually, it's after the balance sheet, which actually has a gray swath or a colored swath down, and that's cash basis. So that is basically looking at what we actually physically receive through our COSI program. And so we actually did receive approximately, I don't know, 100.
What was the net on the cash?
About $50,000 more in cash than was actually billed.
Yeah.
So, the reason though is that in July, you are receiving cash for what was billed in June. High water months, same thing. So that's most of the reason why. But regardless, we're looking at the first document. So again, we can go through and talk about some of the items that are listed there. I think the chair's already identified them, and then I have on the second page of the document a recommendation for some budget adjustments, which depending on how you wanna do it, I can talk about them right now. But, the primary, thing too, that's a little bit different than what you've seen in the past, based on a, request by the finance committee. The, QuickBooks only will give us the July through December actual numbers, and then the year-to-date budget, which is a 6-month budget. You'll notice that there's some really fun, great little numbers there, like $879,999.98 as your half year. That's half of 1,760,000, but that's because when you divide the 1,760,000 by 12, that's how they gotta put them into the budget. So we also got a line, we also got a column on the far right, that gives you your full year budget. So the finance committee thought that would be really helpful, because there are expenses, like our automobile insurance expense of $68,000, that all happens in the fall, but, we haven't budgeted for the full year. I'll just mention a couple things, if you'd be okay with it. We obviously are, we're selling more water. There was a lot more water used. It was hot in July, August, September, and October. It started raining in November. So we are over our revenue budget, in domestic water sales of about $100,000. So I'm suggesting that we bump up our revenue budget by about, I think it's $50,000. Same thing with ag, by about $70,000. Because when you look at your first expense, which is your water purchase, we're almost at budget. We purchased more water because we sold more water.
Right.
So it balances those out. You'll notice as you get into the treatment side, there are still some, in like 3,200, which is our repair and maintenance. Some of those most expensive items that we budgeted last year, we spent $90,000+ in this, or $99,000 in this column. So Bill can tell you more if he wants, but there's a lot of that is coming in this year. We're a little bit higher on chemicals. We've obviously been using processing a lot of water, and so again, overall, the treatment budget is running under budget. When you get into distribution, again, we are impacted by the large number of leaks that have been reported to you when Morgan, our distribution supervisor, was here. So we're at $140,000 in repair and maintenance expense, and our aging infrastructure is really hurting us. And so we are getting close to our full year budget on that. I'm suggesting that we bump that budget, expense budget by $40,000 to $190, which would be a little closer to what it was last year as well. But when you have that many leaks, it impacts your inventory, tools, etc. And in this item I just mentioned to you, when just two 18-inch couplers cost $3,400.
Yep.
14-inch couplers cost $2,700. 10-inch macros are $1,300. So when you gotta buy those to refill your inventory, so you're gonna see how the inventory has gone up. It also impacts the fact that sometimes they're working long hours and we gotta buy meals and other things. So there's a few other things that happen there. And in anticipation of our future item, which is a recommendation to actually purchase a vac trailer, of that $139,897 worth of expense, $22,000 of that is rental of a vac trailers for the last 6.5, 7 months. So a little investment to have the equipment local would actually help that expense. The other thing, and I know we talked about this right after we had done, well, I'll just mention before I get to that one. The property and liability insurance, we got a little miscoding there. That's $79,000. Most of that is $63,000 for our vehicle insurance, which needs to be coded in the item, on the line item below. We knew that we had a CalPERS unfunded accrued liability, which is 51442. We really hoped that it was only gonna be $100,000, and that's what we put there as our budget. It's gonna come in more like 150,000 or 160. So we're gonna need to increase that budget. One of the things, just wanna remind the board, we had a line item, 75900, which is discretionary fund balance reserve, in which when we were budgeting, we assiduously held back as much money as we possibly can in anticipation of being able to do something out of the treatment plant to improve the treatment plant. We also budgeted in the treatment division for the $20,000 PACE engineering study, of which they, Bill provided a presentation to you in December. Costs of $8 to $12 million. You directed us to go and start looking for grants and looking for something that we could do sort of on the short term. Is there something that we could spend $50, $60, $70,000 of this to go do? And so I'm recommending that we take $100,000 of that discretionary fund balance reserve, redistribute it to some of those accounts I mentioned to you, distribution, our unfunded actuarial liability, and a few others, and hold back $63,000 in that fund to match the close to $20,000 that we have left in the treatment capital fund, to actually start working on something soon, right? You know, whether it's an electrical panel or whatever it could be that was identified in that report that we can do now and not have to ask for as much of a grant for. Again, the balance sheet will, well, the bottom line.
Can I interrupt a second?
Yeah.
I'd like to, if it's okay, deal with the July through December budget to actual first. You know, deal with, and then touch on the balance sheet afterwards, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, questions by the board on the budget to actuals for the last 6 months, or the first 6 months of this current fiscal year? Anybody?
Well, this might be something we're gonna get into later, but Paul mentioned making a budget adjustment to distribution for maintenance and repair of $40,000, which would, I think you said, put us in the range of what we had budgeted for FY24. That does not seem like it's gonna be an adjustment that really addresses the amount of spending that we're experiencing. I mean, we're already to the 25 budget amount by, we're $11,000 under it. Do we need to, I mean, you mentioned moving some funds from that discretionary reserve. Would it be in the amount of $100,000? Because that's what you need to realistically be making that adjustment by.
Yeah,
Good question.
yeah, we can cover that even more, but it's, in the last document for this item is the recommended budget adjustments. You'll see it in the far right column,
I jumped the gun on
which
that.
is shaded. But that's okay, but we can also cover it too, it's in my memo back too, but basically you're right. My recommendation is we bump up a little bit of the revenue in water sales, that budget, so because we were way underestimated, we already were way over what we even budgeted for, and so, that will offset the increased cost of water. And then for these other expenses, we just need to reallocate some of that discretionary reserve. One expense that we budgeted for that we can move into a different area is election. We budgeted $8,000 for election. We didn't have a competitive election. We just had 3 that applied for the 3 seats. So therefore we can zero out that expense budget item and move that 8,000.
And the EAGSA. So there were a few things. Any other questions for the board? I do have a few. Let's see. Let's start with since it's distribution, aging system that we're spending all this money on, is there some way of mitigating some of these expenses? Are there things within this category that can be adjusted?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay, we have, line items for different things within distribution, expenses on, or budgeted for. Are there things, an example would be, could we avoid using the vac trailer, since we spent $22,000 the last 6 months? Could we have avoided that? Because I know, having talked to prior employees, they hardly ever rented a vac trailer. They did it by hand. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but I'm saying, are there things that we can do to mitigate some of these expenses?
Win the lottery and replace all of our pipelines with modern pipes.
I understand that.
You have heard from your distribution supervisor 2 months ago. You heard from multiple others that vac trailers are very, very critical. You watched PG&E contractors underground all of their electricity on Happy Valley Road. Every other, Centerville's got a vac trailer, Rio Alto's got a vac trailer. Everybody's going to the vac trailer because it's faster, more efficient, and reduces the district's liability. Because when you've got electricity or multiple utilities in the ground, that's why everybody's going to the vac trailer, because I don't really want our backhoe folks out there with high voltage electricity while they're trying to dig down and to get into it. So again, I think efficient use of equipment is probably definitely something we can continue to pursue. You've heard that a new distribution supervisor has learned that there are times when it may not be as effective to work all night on things, so that can kind of reduce some of our costs. But I'm not sure how many other items we can do to mitigate these costs, other than getting some big grants and replacing a lot of more pipeline.
I'm thinking, can we be more efficient at some things? Okay, that's the reason I brought that up. What was the other item? With the, I know we can't do it mid-year, but at the end of this current fiscal year, will you take the retained revenue and reimburse the discretionary reserves? Rebuild with that money. If we currently, I'm sorry to interrupt, currently under the cash basis, we have about 141,000 net positive. If we end up the fiscal year with that, can we roll 100,000 of that back into that to, in a sense, reestablish that account?
Yeah.
Okay.
Long and short of it is, that is why you have that discretionary reserve. Really, it is your, most entities that I work for, we call it fund balance instead of calling it retained earnings, because you're working for a government entity. You take your fund balance, whatever's left over, you actually put it in as potential usage for your budgeting purposes, or you put it in reserves for later budget.
Special projects maybe, like a training. Okay.
No, I think, it's a really good point. That's why I kind of harped on it on the previous item, because it's the first time we've actually seen that. Most of the time that just kind of gets absorbed. And I think once we get that audited and we know what it is, it'll help us.
Agreed. All right.
And so, I have one
Go
question.
right ahead.
So, and I know you have this number in your mind, Paul, but, in our Win Act reserves, I think I saw $63,000 in it. Can we take any of that, since we don't owe Win Act anymore, can we put it towards something, like the electricity that, Bill needs?
The electrical panel?
Yeah, so, it's possible, I'll just remind you on a line item 14010, this is where you take your reserves and put it into your operating fund as, putting in quotes your revenue, so then you can use it in your expenses. And so we are already budgeting to bring in $55,000 from our WINAC reserve. Remember, that is a payment from the $1.38 per month that is on people's bills. It goes into a reserve, and then it pays back what that was originally designed to pay back a note, right, that paid off the WINAC. In this case, the operating fund, the cash in the entity paid off the WINAC, and it's gonna get repaid. So yes, I mean, effectively, that's what we're doing already in this budget.
Okay.
So would you take, say, half of that, maybe, and we talked about transferring 50, 55, would you put it back into the discretionary reserve to rebuild that?
No, currently, this budget calls for $55,000 to be taken,
Right.
brought in from reserves. It's already distributed in expenses at $55,000.
Darn. I understand.
Again, though, hopefully, the plan always is to come to you quarterly, so in a couple months we can come to you. And I can report to you that reserve fund, because we have been putting money into the reserve as we committed to, is like $110,000. So we could use it even more specific, say we're gonna take 30 more, pay down our obligation, and we're gonna take that 30 and we're gonna put it to some other project. So that can enhance that 60,000.
I have one other question. I noticed a significant difference in the balance sheets from June 30, 2024 to December 31 on the total liabilities and equity. We dropped about 577,000. Was wondering, I was taking a look at that and trying to figure out where that went. And I can ask you instead of hunting.
Well, I can't answer that right off the top of my head. I mean, I can point out to you though that your expansion and modernization reserve grew by that rate that we have. Your operational reserve grew. There's obviously some expenses or some liabilities that are more than what was at the end of the FY24.
I was trying to find out if some of it was grant related. I couldn't figure that part out.
It's quite probable, I just can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, okay. Is there a chance you can answer that for us next meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions on 6D? Either the
only
budget
thing-
versus actual or the balance sheet?
The only thing I would request is basically an approval by the board for the budget modifications as recommended in the final document.
No, I was about to get to that in case there was any other questions. Any questions about the adjustments that our general manager is proposing?
I'm gonna look at it one more time.
All right.
So if you're looking at the sheet with the grayed out on the far right side, might be easiest to identify what we're doing there. So,
While she's looking, I'm still, if I can sidetrack you just slightly, I'm noticing that the wells, utilities are still dropping and spiking all over the place. I'm wondering if there's some way we can get them to just give us a nice low number and stay that way.
yeah, we're always working on dealing with PG&E on that.
It can be 2,200 a month or 63 or 6,400 a month.
That's because they had 6 raises last year.
Yeah. Is there anything we can do about that while Director Fickus is looking?
I've looked. I mean, I'm ready.
Oh, you're ready, okay, well, let's go ahead and go with that.
Are you talking about this one, Paul, with the solid, or this one that's got the hit and miss?
The hit and miss one.
Okay.
Because those are, the first column is our approved budget for
Yeah.
FY '25. The second column has the shaded ones that are the recommended
Or-
modifications.
Okay. Where will this, and I know it's a different item, but where in this budget, amended budget proposal, does the vac trailer come in? What line item? When we get to that and make a talk about it, I wanna know where that's coming out of. What line item?
Well, it is not gonna come out of any of these line items, because the recommendation is to use the, capital improvement and modernization reserve, which currently has $154,000 in it, and that's 1.8% of the base rate that's been going into that. And that, we would use $35,382.50 of that, whatever that number is. And so we would take that money and purchase the piece of equipment, not run it through this.
Okay.
And so technically, by doing that, we have already spent 22,000, that would be 35,000, so we're still about 13,000 short. But we're only in the first 2 months of this year.
Yeah.
So, it would technically pay for itself.
Could very well.
That's coming up shortly.
Yeah,
we'll
I
dive
just
into it.
wanted to know what line item
Not
it
a
all.
problem.
I mean,
But it also goes against our priority, which was to get Bill a new train.
Well, we'll work on it.
What,
Well, we said that last year,
Well, we're closer this year.
not much.
okay, I'm happy.
All
Or
right, so
I'm
on
okay.
D, any other questions or comments before we make a motion to approve the budget adjustments? No, do we have a motion then to approve our general manager's budget adjustments?
I move to accept the budget adjustment, 6-month budget adjustment as listed, by General Manager Kelly.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
All right, having a motion and a second on the budget adjustments. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, motion carries. And we move on to cross connections. That's a fun one.
well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board, is aware that I've, reported to you in December that the state on July 1 of 2024 adopted a cross-connection control handbook that required all water districts to comply with a cross-connection control plan by July 1 of 2025. There are a significant number of regulatory requirements after you've got your plan updated and approved. There's also, for larger agencies than ourselves, a requirement that water districts, in this case it's going to be the city of Reading, City of Anderson's already done it, and I think City of Shasta Lake, they're still negotiating it, to have on staff somebody who is either specialist or backflow tester who's gone through the process. The plan also has to be drafted by a specialist. Then you are required to do a hazard assessment. I'm referring to it as surveys, but technically at some point in the next 5 years, plus or minus, the district will have to visit every connection that it has to its water system to make sure that it is not a threat to the water system. If it's a threat to the water system, then it has to require that the some sort of backflow or cross-connection control device be installed. So you can start running some numbers in your head. That's a very big, expensive, unfunded mandate. We are a small enough agency, so we can actually contract this out. I've talked to 3 consulting firms, one of which said they don't do any of the surveys or hazard assessments, but they would write us a new plan for $10,000. Talked to another one that said they would do a plan for $10,000, and they would charge us something like $300 or $400 to do per connection assessment, but they didn't really put that in a formal thing. And then I talked to HydroCorp, who said that they would do kind of a phased approach. They would draft a plan, and then they would do their first surveys would be for our commercial, industrial, and institutional connections. So that'll be our stores, our schools, and our firehouse and others. So that kept the price down. So you can see they're willing to do that over a 2-year period of time for $12,000. Then I said to them, look, I don't have this budgeted, so can you help me a little bit here? And so they propose that if we approve and sign today, they have 2 documents. One, they'll do the plan and get it ready, and they'll basically update our current water regulations for submittal and approval by the state by July 1. And they will not invoice us until they start the surveys after July 1, which means,
Still at 12,000?
but over 2 years.
You're asking for a senior discount?
But it's $6,000 a year, so we can find some room in our budget next year for $6,000. So, again, they're working with us, which I gotta say, is pretty helpful. And then the other thing is I need from them is that they said it's not in their document, that they will provide by the end of their first year a cost estimate to survey or do a hazard assessment for all of the rest of the connections in the district. Because we're gonna need that when we start figuring out our rates next time. Because regulatory compliance has not necessarily been part of our rates, and we're gonna need to have that part of our rates. This is different than the annual backflow testing that we do on the current backflow devices, 100 plus or minus that we have in the district. We charge people a monthly fee for that. We then turn around and pay a company to go out and do those tests for us. So with that, I recommend that you, by motion, authorize the general manager to sign the agreements that are attached.
Discussion?
We don't have a choice.
That's enough. Anybody from the audience comment?
So, comment question, it sounds great that they're willing to work with us and such, but for the future estimates for the rest of the connections for the home situations, are they potentially willing to do like a breakdown of, if we have 2,000 some odd connections, if they're willing to do like 750 one year, 750 the next year, and 750 the following year to break down the cost on the...
Yeah, that would definitely be,
You get it in writing.
Negotiable.
that'll be, that's one of their tasks while they start the surveys is to give us, like, this is what it's gonna cost if we did 200 a year for the next 10 years, which when we present that to the state, may not be approved by the state. They probably want to see us do more like 700 or something like that.
Would you share with us the reason the cost for the plan was only $6,000? It had to do with ordinance, didn't it, from 2016? We just need, is there some work we have to do to adapt it?
Yeah, so the rules for water service that the district operates by were approved, I believe it was, current copy is, I'm just looking at my picture here, I think it's number 12, XII. It was in 2016, last time updated. In those rules for water service, it does require that all new connections have a backflow device. So we just haven't had a lot of new connections over the last number of years. So the plan is they're taking that document, they're gonna take the handbook requirements from the state, they're gonna update our document, we're gonna bring it to you for approval, and we're gonna ship it off to the state and hopefully get a stamp of approval.
And that'll be $6,000.
That will be $0.
Oh.
It is part of the $6,000 they will charge us in the next fiscal year when
Right.
they start the surveys.
Okay, and there was the additional survey for the commercial, industrial, whatever. Were there about 80 or so connections?
Actually, there's like 41.
Only 41 schools and,
I move that we accept the proposed contract and have the general manager sign it.
with HydroCorp.
I will second that.
Having a motion and a second to accept the terms of HydroCorp's proposal. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Now that last item, as you know, because I've reported to you, has caused a lot of headaches. And pretty thrilled with what they propose. All right, next item here is grant writing services, Jim Wadley agreement. As you might recall, we again had our supervisor come make a presentation at our last meeting. Talked to him about the need for grants. The board has been bugging me for a while now. Go find some help to write grant. I've been looking around, truthfully, PACE has done a lot of our grants, application and written grants. There's really one engineering firm in Eureka that's a water engineering firm that has somebody water specific, so, and their costs looked pretty significant. So, long and short, we could do, and if you want me to, we can do an RFQ, an RFP for services. But I was put in contact with.
What's an RFP?
What's that?
What's an RFP?
Oh, request for proposals,
Thank you.
like more formal than what we have. So talk to Jim, who's, as you can see in his background, very successful in getting grants for the Reading Airport. And getting grants in other places where he's worked for municipalities. In my opinion, the district would be well served to have somebody that basically on a very reasonable retainer to really help, like not only tracking things down, but also really bird dogging. The biggest thing is that, like we've complained about our distribution improvement grant. It's been, the PACE wrote that grant. RCAC applied for it at the state. They have never followed up, 3 years, they haven't really followed up on it. So having somebody that actually puts it in there and calling people, following up, would be, I think, super helpful. Again, the proposal is very reasonable, it's flexible, and it just,
How much?
when I mentioned it to the finance committee, a couple of their concerns, just in case they want to bring them up. One, would this be more work for me, managing this contract? And initially it might be, but as you can see in his proposal, he would be working with PACE Engineering. I mean, I asked PACE Engineering, what's it gonna take if we want a separate grant, let's say for the treatment plant? Well, minimum $20,000 to put together a grant application and to get it, turned in and do the engineering. I said, what would it take to just do a little bit of engineering support if I had somebody else write a grant? Oh, probably $5,000 to $8,000, just give or take. And so what Jim's proposing is basically a $10,000 contract for the coming year, for 12 months. My recommendation is that you authorize me to sign it. It's within my authorization, so in some ways I didn't have to bring it to you, but I thought for full disclosure, we should have it here and have that conversation. Plus, to be honest with you, I wanted to, you've been badgering me. I wanted to work on it. And also I wanted to have it in a public place, because Jim's here. And so I'd like to have him be available if you have some questions specifically for him, just kind of what he can do. So the other thing too, like in my discussion with him, one of the items he has on here, other items that could help would be assist with the development of a capital improvement fund. Well, as we're looking at grants and looking at different things. Now, admittedly, there's, a commitment for, at least one free, grant application uncovered under this, and, we'd have to do more, we'd probably pay more. So, long and short of it is, you got an experienced person who's used to getting grants, knows how to navigate it. We'll get them educated on water grants, but, it's no different than other grants.
The fact is that Chris recommended it, and I highly appreciate and go with what Chris was saying. You seem quite happy, and the fact is that you're getting buried with work, and we absolutely need to do the grants. So if this young man is capable and willing and wants to, we need to go with it.
Jim, why don't you come up and tell us how capable and willing you are?
Honorable members of the board and management and members of the public. I'm Jim Wadley, and I started Wadley Management a little over a year ago. Let me back up and just kind of explain. I did 5 years active duty Marine Corps. Then I did about 10 years of public service with San Mateo County under the Department of Public Works. So my colleagues had a water department. Definitely picked up a lot of stuff, but then I worked with City of Palo Alto for about 5 years, and then I went over to the City of Reading for another 5. So for the last 20 years, I've probably done, and I've actually lost count, but probably about $100 million in grants. And that includes me managing those projects. I'm also, you're not just getting a grant writer, but I'm also skilled with economic development. I want to be an extension of your staff, God bless you, and make things easier. So my job is actually to go out and find those things. Even when you're talking about a trailer, right away I'm thinking there's got to be a state program where I can go get a trailer. I've been able to get airport equipment using a grant.
Yeah,
Smallest grant ever gotten is
our
$10,000.
fleet, our fleet's aging, and we're gonna redo it. Jim and I talked about just fleet alone, is something. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I mean, sometimes there's costs you can actually go and seek reimbursement. So I actually would like to not have to cost you anything, because sometimes I can apply my time to grants so that there's actually net savings there. But I'm going to give you some examples of just some things that I've been thinking about. Besides the proposal, I want to get together a grant pipeline. I need to sit down with Paul. I need to sit down with some staff, and I'd like to go and look at everything, because I have a photographic memory. Once I have something, I got it. But I want to create a grant pipeline, and also create a master grant calendar. So sometimes there's some deadlines, and you gotta get things out there right away. So I put priority to those that would be due right away. I would also create a grant template library, because a lot of this stuff is similar in nature, and I just want to be able to go and extract stuff. So there's going to be an initial lead up where I'm going to be grabbing and gathering data, talking with Pace Engineering and anybody else that you guys have, and try to get as much intel as I can, because I want to find in those initiatives that the state will actually they put the programs out there for. So if we can align with those initiatives, we can get the grants. So the other thing that I want to be able to do is with some of the overlapping things that we're doing, you might even be able to, with what I'm doing, do multiple grants and not have any extra cost whatsoever. So I have that certain level of curiosity where I'm always looking for grants. I have things that come in front of me all the time. This is kind of my bread and butter, and I love working on grants because if we're not doing it, somebody else is. And that district or that entity is enhancing as things go. So I also managed and operated and administered an enterprise fund. So I know what it's like, you know, to have an enterprise fund and have to have users that you don't want to have to go to them and raise rates. I've always been very successful freezing rates and going after grants. And so that I've been able to do successfully at the city of Reading. Very successfully, actually. I've got a lot of success there. And I was told when I first got there, you know, no projects for 2 years. And I said, okay. And they said, well, Jim, we gotta let the budget heal. You know, no projects for 2 years. And I said, okay. Jim, I know you like projects. No projects for 2 years. And I said, it's not all I do, but I did get started right then for 2 years from then. And then the grants just started getting 100% grants, 90% grants. I even got national grants that would fund the lowest priority projects, and airport managers across the United States would cuss my name because I was able to get low priority projects funded. It's all in the wordsmithing, and I've just got that certain level of curiosity to find those things. And I want to make sure that one of the most important things is that you're keeping up with the reporting and that you're staying in compliance. You don't want to get put in the penalty box. You don't want to have to send some money back. And so those are going to be things that I'll be worrying about and updating you guys. I can do it quarterly, I can do it whenever you want. But I definitely would be researching the grants, collecting the required documentation, identifying, you know, the partner commitments, and, you know, leveraging. I mean, I want to try to maximize grants for you guys to the point where you guys are saying, Jim, slow down, you know, because and I've been told that before. But it sounds like you guys need it. And there's grants out there, small, large, complex, and I've been through everything. I've pretty much seen it all. I've even had grant money taken away from me, and I got it back twice. But there's a ton of legwork involved with grants, and I just have that level of understanding of how they program it, what the administrators of those programs are looking for. And I would love to be able to have a letter that says I represent you, and then I will coordinate directly with them and just make life easy. So that's kind of my purpose.
Questions?
I
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, just in your proposal that you have here, the amount of money, so the rest of the board knows, it's not writing a grant. That's not what's in this fee, right?
It's included, so I am gonna be writing one free grant, and that's up to 40 hours. So there's you know, on average, because I do have an hourly rate, and these things, depending on how complex your project is and what it involves, there's a ton of coordination. You know, I put in there about 7 hours, and I can tell you right now, you're gonna get the better of the deal. So it's just, you know, I gotta protect, so I'm not, you know, doing 80 hours in a month and only getting paid for 7, but I can tell you that, you know, I have the same ownership that you guys do when I come on board.
Okay.
This is my problem to solve too.
We want the 2 million grant for the freebie.
Yeah.
I'm confident I can get the grants. I'm confident. There's a lot of these sources are common to water districts. You know, I've already found a bunch of them. Even the cross connection, there's about 3 of them out there already that I'm looking at. So.
Johnson?
Mr. Wadley, it seems like you've been primarily speaking about state grants, state funding.
Mostly federal, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
but a lot of the state too.
a lot of upheaval on the federal side in the last month, it seems like.
And there could be some new ones.
Right, could be. So, spending freezes and all of that talk. I'm ecstatic that we found you. The timing of finding you seems a little unfortunate, but you have a better outlook on that than I might. Seems to me that we might be coming up against a pretty substantial cliff when it comes to trying to secure that federal funding. Do you think that we're going to be successful out the gate here in 2025?
Well, what I wanna get is an understanding of what your critical projects are, because even though we can pursue some grants, it depends on when the cycles hit. So I'm gonna go and try to find out when we can get an application in, and sometimes there's requirements that you need to already be programmed, so they need to see that capital improvement plan ahead of time, and already kind of programming that a year in advance, if you will, in pencil. And then they go in and they try to do what they need. But then there's discretionary funds, there's entitlements, there's a lot of different things. I know how those entitlements work generally, and I know how to ask those questions. But sometimes there are, you may need to go and get a low interest loan or some other sort of bridge funding. And so, depending on what issues you have, I'm gonna help solve this problem, get the project done so that we don't have those interruptions. And if we do have like an earthquake and things just start, we're gonna be seeking emergency grants, day one. Like, that's what I wanna be there for, is be the first person to be like, okay, I got this, and just start calling, say, look, we got big problems, start documenting things, and just get that project ready to go. So there's, as far as the funding available, I do think that there's gonna be some that, they may say, there's been a lot of waste, like the bill funding, for example. I'm a little bit concerned about that. ARPA, I don't know, but maybe there's some insight. But, whatever is available, we're gonna go after. And, they can't freeze, it depends on, this is a pretty important service, so I don't think that they're going to, do too much to take away, because it's actually gonna cause a lot of problems.
Just
Other questions?
through the chair, just would also mention that, definitely the potential upheaval that's currently there. I mean, you can't let that distract you from sort of the long-term applications.
I don't disagree.
Right. Second of all, last November, the state of California voters passed a bond measure, and I just saw a release by the state that they're starting to put together funding criteria type of stuff. So we'll be, basically knocking on their first in line door. And just real quick, we're already looking at even potentially, $8 to $10 million to do a treatment plant based on the pay study. My guess is we're probably quicker to get some of it under a USDA low interest loan, and some of that stuff you get it funded as a low interest loan, you pay on it for a while, and then they forgive the portion of it. So all that kind of stuff is what we would be.
There's other strategies too, where you can bid a project, you'll have a base bid, so that instead of doing nothing, you can actually do a base bid and have some alternates, so you can at least, phase your project. And one of the things I like about phasing a project is it often forces the federal government to follow up on its federal investment. So sometimes it's a strategy.
Other questions?
I do, I'll hear in the audience.
Okay, I'll get to you in a second.
Okay.
What's your hourly rate?
It's 125 an hour.
125 an hour. And when you are writing grants or things for us, can you include your cost into those grants? Okay.
Yeah, but most times you'll have an administrative cost that will be reimbursable. When it's a contract, I'll have to look and see if that's something, but I will notify you whenever there's an expense that I can't put my time towards. But under contract, it should be covered, unless there's a weird thing.
Usually.
Back to our general manager, if we approve this, where in the budget is this 10,000 coming from?
That's a great question. I knew you were gonna ask that question, and it's under, professional services, under the 5,000 section, and we actually have probably about 6 or 8,000 left in this year that has not been spent on that.
Okay.
It's covered.
And we would be, if we contract him, probably paying him monthly, that,
Right.
what, 825 is it?
Yeah, so that's, under our 50500 line.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Do we have an interest in a motion to contract this gentleman? I'm sorry, yes, please. speak up.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, what's in the contract to control our costs? I've dealt with some lawyers that just kind of go crazy with billing. How do we know that's not gonna happen with you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'll be capped anyway at a monthly rate, And, there's certain deliverables, so that if I'm not meeting the deliverables, you guys cut me.
Okay, so this contract will change then?
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing, your standard contract, so, we can adjust any terms if you need, but, for the most part, I think I've got it covered. We can put the deliverables in there, which I think is important to have, so that you see what you're getting. And, but there is a cap on it.
Okay, that was
And
my
not to
concern.
exceed, there'll be a not to exceed,
Yeah, I was concerned about that, because like I said, I dealt with some attorneys
yeah.
that just keep billing you and billing you and billing you, and it's like, there's no end in sight.
I fully understand
I just
that,
wanna make
that's,
sure that's not gonna happen. in
that's
this
not
situation.
who I am at all, I'm very serious.
So there'll be a termination clause or something in the
Yep.
contract
Yep.
by either party?
It'll probably yield more to you.
Well, that's fine. Do I have a motion?
Wait, one more question.
We have one more
I'm
question.
just a community member, I live across the street, but if you want my input, I say we, give an offer we can't refuse and lock the door to the signs.
I'm pretty creative, but I definitely like to think outside the box.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to.
To the board then.
I make a motion that we, have Paul sign the contract with Waddle and Associates,
Wadley management.
Wadley Management,
Yeah.
and, accept,
The proposal.
the proposal.
I second the motion.
All right, having a motion and a second to contract with Waddle Management.
Wadley.
My apologies.
That's okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's approved. We'll sign that.
Thank you very much to the board.
Thank you,
It'd be my pleasure serving you.
thank you.
Thank you.
We know, we appreciate you a lot.
Me
Thanks,
too.
Jim. All right,
Me
item G, meter reading equipment anomalies. You know that the board has heard about some of the stuff that happened in December, and estimating things, but the primary reason I'm bringing this is that we have a number of instances where we get around to installing a new register and transponder. There may be an instance where, that gets done, the first read creates a fairly anomalous read, and so we then investigate it. I can't, here's my folder of all of the documents that my staff has put together on some of these. And I'll just use a couple of examples. One, Mobile Home Park, wonderful customer, 90-year-old Mavis, calls and says, I got 161 units on this bill, I can't read it. So we look and we find out that for the previous number of months, she used between 3 and 8 units. So we dispatched Morgan out there. Morgan even was allowed to walk around her house and look for leaks, because poor gal, we couldn't find any leaks. So we just said, let's just hold on and see if the next read, and sure enough, the next read's like 4.5 units. And the next read's 5 units. So the only thing that we can, the board, is not giving me any authority to waive any cost past the meter. And there's a good reason for that, because most of the time, water that goes past the meter is from a leak, or if it's gone past the meter for any other reason, it shouldn't be everybody else's responsibility to subsidize that, right, by them not paying. But if you can see my little thing on the bottom here, I think what we're finding is there are some times in which there probably wasn't any water that went through the meter for that, right? There was something else related to the installation of the device, the recalibration. We got somebody down Scout that had like 1,100 units, and every month before that was in the 30 unit, and every month after. So what I'm asking for the board is to give me some authority to give some reviews, to give some justification, to see if there's a reason that we should waive or somehow write off these anomalous ones. And then what I would do is report to you whenever we've done that.
Okay. Questions?
Just a question on the anomalies themselves. Is this happening in the first month that these meters have been installed, or is it okay for a period of time and then all of a sudden it starts getting erratic?
It does appear, that is true. And again, to protect the identity of those that have filed some protests and let us know about it, I can just give you an example. We have one, looks like the device was installed on Flowers Lane sometime in early November. They had a one-time reading that gave them over 1,300 more units than normally that they would use.
For the month of November.
Yeah, for that November reading. And then they protested. We said, let's hold off on it. And then, of course, the next reading, they were back to 40 units, which is kind of what they did before. I've got another one that has a one-time reading in December, because I think that it looks like the device was installed December 7th, the meter was read on the 12th, and we had a 690 unit reading when previous one was 2, previous to that was 12. Still not sure, and then, we've had others.
What does the people who make the meters say?
Well, they, Morgan has been talking to them on a fairly regular basis. There's a couple of things. One, they had us check, there's a factor that you have to have correct. In other words, the transponder, I should have brought it in here, the transponder and the register device will fit on a 5/8, 3/4, 1, 1.5, all the way up to like a 2-inch meter. But depending on the size of your meter, you have, it's a different recording, and so you have to make sure your factor is right. That definitely was an issue with some, and that appears to have solved those. So that's what was checked for these two, and so far it's still not showing up as that being the reason for the particular one.
Anything else?
So what you're asking for is not that we're forgiving any water leaks that somebody has, but that you're wanting us to give you the authority to modify their bill to reflect what they probably truly have used.
In essence, yes, and basically there is some investigation. In other words, we had a few protests in which we sent our operator staff out, and they had high usage, and it was because they had a leak in the back of their house, and we sent them up saying, sorry, can't deal with that. We obviously have sent other people out to see and make sure that they don't have a leak, they do not have a leak. We've reread the meter, we've held on to it to kind of get a couple more months afterward, tried to figure out if it was some other reason, if there was some factor in the actual device that was causing it. So what I'm recommending is, once we've done a complete investigation and we've proven that it's
Not a leak.
it's not a leak and that it's
Accurate.
phantom water, basically, I don't know what else to put it, then we'll figure out some way to give them a credit or something like that.
What's the pleasure of the board?
You don't necessarily have to give a motion, I just want to have a consensus that.
I make a
That's what I'm
motion
saying.
that we, give the general manager the option to investigate, for true water usage. And if it is incorrect, that he has, or they have, the discretion to adjust the bill.
I have to pull that one from the video.
Yeah. I'm not your repeating it.
No, I don't believe so. but
Basically,
I
we're
would
gonna
second
give the
that.
general manager authority to resolve anomalies.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Oh, we don't need a motion, if we all agree,
Yeah.
Clara, please.
Well, wait a minute, we got a motion.
You're right, and a second, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Are you guys all okay with it? Good.
Yeah, I was gonna say on the factor thing, is it just basically like how much water's flowing through it and creating a spin, so it's smaller pipes are potentially creating a higher spin factor? That's, okay.
I do have one question, and it relates to, it seems like there was some coding issue on my particular account on the November one, and, the account, clerk in the office, when they pulled my account up, saw that, and there was something written in there, or whatever, that changed how mine was being read, so I was overcharged significantly.
Me too. Me too.
Okay, so if you haven't had it dealt with, come on in, they'll take care of it.
They fixed it 2 cycles later, it got it right.
Well, there was the estimate, which was only for 1 month, but the prior month, there was an anomaly on mine that I brought to their attention, so they're good about fixing things.
It'll get resolved.
Okay, moving on to H, purchase
All right, so
of
this is
equipment.
the used back trailer purchase. As the board's aware, the staff has had a strong desire for a number of months, if not years, to have a back trailer at their disposal. Last year, this time, I actually sent out RFPs for proposals for a new back trailer. In various manufacturers and sizes, they range in cost from $80,000 to $135,000. We did not proceed with that because we didn't really have the resources, number one. Number two, once we received all of those proposals, all of the staff left that was here at that time. We have looked at Ritchie Brothers and others. There's oftentimes you'll see 15 to 20-year-old back trailers with thousands of hours, in some cases tens of thousands of hours. But we recently found a 2013 Ditch Witch at a back trailer at Mach 1 Machinery in South Reading area, right near I-5 Rentals, where we rent our product a lot. They had an item for $35,000. They reduced it to $33,000. You'll see the sales invoice that's enclosed. I dispatched our distribution supervisor to go look at it. She provided a report, it's also enclosed. They've done all the maintenance, they've updated the O-rings, they've done a whole bunch of different things to get it up and ready. They are actually community-minded. They're holding it until we make this decision. They've had other inquiries. They've sold similar but smaller products. One to Rio Alto about 6 months ago, and they've also worked with other municipalities, so they're kind of interested in keeping it close. They can also have said they would come out and maintain it since they're close, and if we ever have a problem, they would even do some training.
And Gully Tractors looked at it too. I
Yeah,
read.
yeah.
And they liked it, and
Yeah.
that's the guy who does all of our work on all of our tractors.
Yes, and he kind of went through it thoroughly and kind of gave it a stamp of the seal. As I mentioned before, since July of 2024, we've spent $22,000 on back trailer rentals, and if that keeps up, we will spend the $35,000 that we would have on this. I really encourage the board to move on this item. We have, as I reported to the Finance Committee, we have $150,000 plus in the expansion and modernization reserve, so it's an opportunity to use a little bit of that money. We still got over $100,000 of it plus money in the WIN Act if you identify a project for the treatment plant. We can handle that, and we would use that reserve. It's specifically a modernization and really to go prove that, the added budgetary amounts for all those repairs and maintenance would not, be needed. I can tell you our distribution supervisor, Morgan, just was very excited once she got to see it and confirm that it's everything that they wanted and everything that they would want.
Ditch Witch is a good name.
Yeah, so, and it's less than 1,000 hours. So I recommend, to the board that you, by motion, approve, the use of expansion and modernization reserve monies in the amount of $35,392.50, for the purchase from Lot 1 of the Ditch Witch 2013 FX 30.
Questions from any board members? Yes, go ahead.
I don't remember if we asked you in the finance committee or not in regards to this. This is a diesel unit, is that
Yeah.
correct? So is there any kind of, all these semi trucks that if they're too old, so, yeah, the carb compliant, so
Yeah.
we're okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
but yes, that is obviously something you got to question, and that's one of the things we asked Dolly as well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Are we okay because we're governmental and we operate in a county that allows that, or?
It's a combination of that, it's also a mobile, it's not an immobile source, so that's the other thing that government entities were running into with our generators, right? The immobile sources, and that's why we had to dispose of that.
Right. Following audience? Go ahead.
Is it an SE equipment plate or is it a, actual PTI plated vehicle?
That, you have no.
Okay, and then that's just because of the titling situation. Secondary question is if they're more for community stuff, I'm fine with you guys paying the 33 if you guys agree to it, but if they're willing to do like an owner finance over a 6-month period, so then it's not so hard on our budget situation, if they're willing to carry that over a 6-month situation as a legal owner.
Yeah,
I
it's
know,
a really good question, and we actually asked that, and for this particular item, they were not able to do that.
These are consignments or
Yeah.
Okay,
out of a landscaper from
Yeah.
Chico.
gotcha.
Were you asking if they had a separate license?
No,
Yeah.
SE, it's a special equipment plate, it's different than a.
It says PPI on it, you can see the tags there.
Oh, I can't read it online.
Come look at it.
No.
Jacob, come
I'm
look.
gonna take a picture of yours.
It's in the,
There.
there's pictures there.
Yeah, that's PTI, you're fine. Sorry.
Hey,
I can show you the color match if you want.
don't have to pay again.
It's $10 every 5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
It's nothing.
Yeah. I've kind of been behind some of getting this for the district. I have an account with Ritchie Brothers, and, I've done some legwork and whatnot. Anyway, I initially was very much strongly in favor of this, but unfortunately tonight, Mr. Watley mentioned that he might be able to find one for us. And that might, and I'm not trying to throw a wrench in it.
That's not what he said. He said that he would find the grant to repay us for it.
It's a possibility. So, because of our finances, is that something that we want to do that or not?
Yes. We could have paid 2/3 of it in 2 months.
I'm only asking.
Well, I think if you don't get it now, you're not gonna get one for a long time if you're waiting around for somebody to get a grant to do it. Number two, we would put this in our capital and equipment so that would be, could get paid for, or at least portion of it paid for on a back-end grant. So I would encourage the board to decide yea or nay now. I mean, I gotta say, we can afford it, and I think it would be a valuable investment for the district. And, I talked about the $22,000 that we paid out. That does not include the time that we're paying for our staff to drive down to I-5, pick it up, bring it here, take it back, then return, right? So, I mean, that shortens the time of usage. If we got it in our shop, we can grab it. There's also a lot of other things, as you know, Morgan reported to you, there's some known leaks, there's some box and PRV clean out things, like things that she doesn't wanna spend $500 or $700 on a rental, but if we've got one, we'll schedule that work on Thursday.
Little leaks, curve,
The
and whatnot.
nag, yeah.
Yeah, the little naggies out there.
An old name.
I agree. In that case, do we have a motion? Anybody interested in getting a back trailer?
I'll make a motion to get the back trailer.
To authorize the general manager to purchase?
Yeah.
I second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second authorizing the general manager to purchase this particular ditch witch back trailer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have a back trailer, folks.
Yay, it'll be exciting. All right, this last item should be very quick. You might recall the district owns some shares in Principal Financial Group. The shares are held at ComputerShare. We're unable to access those shares because
I went
the
through this.
logins and all the rest of the stuff. And they have informed us that we need a resolution by the board to kill the old account and start a new account. So that's what you have, is the resolution and the proposal.
Can we sell the shares?
Huh?
Can we sell the shares?
We kinda need to know what we got and how.
Yeah, how much?
Well, I just went through that with computer shares,
Did you?
and yeah, and
Okay.
they're not that easy to work with, but you can sell them.
Yeah, so I think what we wanna get access to, we're gonna find out what are our restraints, why we have this, well, how much, what are their value, and then we'll come back to you and say, here we go,
Sounds
what should we do?
Good.
Any other questions?
What even is it? What is ComputerShare?
Oh, it's actually a company, kinda like, would be like Schwab or Fidelity, that actually holds the shares. You own shares of
Okay,
a
alright.
Stop.
So it's
stock of a company, and they actually hold them for you.
And
okay.
a long time ago, like about 10 years ago, or maybe a little longer, some different companies just started giving these shares away. That's how I got mine, right? And, I sold them because it's not a company I really want to keep, but it was just something that happened. I don't know if it was promo gimmick or what, but that's how they came about.
So, you
And
mentioned the
it's real-
word resolution. Do we do this by motion or resolution?
Got an ordinance in here, 2502. My recommendation is by, motion you approve that ordinance.
All right. Do I have a, motion to approve ordinance 2025-02?
I will make a motion to approve ordinance 2025-02, to reestablish or eliminate our existing account and reestablish a new account with ComputerShare Corp.
A
I
second?
second it. I second it.
Okay. Having a motion and a second, all in favor? Any opposed? We have a new passenger.
Hopefully we can execute it. I can tell you, my son works for Fidelity, and he said, can I ask him, I said, why do we have to do this? And then, it's ComputerShare.
That's right.
Not easy to work with.
Yeah, wait till you get to do the rest of the steps.
Okay, under the general manager report, I have a bunch of information in here about the backwash ponds project. I think I reported last month. The pond 3 is
Yes, I do.
90%.
My apologies.
Hey,
90% complete. They did find a leak. Once it stops raining, they're gonna go out and fix that leak. I guess when it gets about halfway full, there's a seam that needs some basically epoxy concrete. We did get, and you saw that in the unreconciled January P&L, we actually finally got Callaway FEMA to write a check for $1.3 million to reimburse us. We have since turned around and paid down our grant anticipation note. We kind of used up a lot of our slack time on this project because that pond 3 needs to be operational really by the end of March, because that's the pond that's gonna get used full time by the treatment plant while they're cleaning out and preparing for concrete pour pond 2. distribution improvement grant, I know I've mentioned it before. This one is really frustrating. It was a plan of study grant application for a couple $100,000 to actually study and confirm the $3.5 million distribution improvement. RCAC submitted it. They had all the codes, they hadn't followed up, so we are getting the codes, we're getting all the information, and we're taking great pace before to do this grant, go bird dog it. I already reported to you the ARPA grant. We have complied with the counties and the federal government's requirements. We've spent the money. They wanted us to spend it by the end of this year, so we have. Little staff update. We have recruited for the all operators D2 and above. We have offered the D2 position as a promotion to Ben Wallace, our D1, who's senior and really did a great job in his interview and appears very committed to the district and is really anxious to move up. To backfill the D1, we will offer that we had another person that actually has a D2, went to school to get that D2 and T2 on a sort of a rehab, education purposes, but has yet to actually work in the field. So they would be a really good candidate to be a D1.
What do you mean by rehab? So he was injured?
Yeah, he got injured. I think he was working for, might have been working for the Air Pacific, and they sent him to.
Does he fit in with the rest of the guys?
We think so.
Well, but if they're digging ditches, the other gentleman that ended up having to quit because he didn't realize he'd be digging so many holes, that would be my concern.
There's a significant age difference.
Yeah.
I am sorry to announce that one of the reasons why I am not attended by Amity is that she handed in her resignation today. They gave 2 weeks notice. Going to another employer, not public sector, but she's very committed to her schooling, and she's got quite a few units, and so she has an opportunity to work part-time and do her schooling. I tried to do whatever I could to prevent it, but unfortunately I could not. I also put about a page and a half of report on the Mid-Pacific Water Users Conference, and from the time I think I'll let Director Fickus do most of that. I would just add that I did attend the Central Valley Project Water Association meeting on the Tuesday. We did re-elect some board members to that association. It's based on regions. We have a North region, a SAC region, a East region, a Bay region, and a South region. So I think there's 5 from each region. We also have a financial affairs committee meeting at that time. We got a report from the Bureau on Folsom Dam payments, some of the other payment processing, and it sounds like they've got some issues, which is why we haven't gotten that reconciliation stuff dealt with. But they are, which is quite amusing, and multiple members of the committee gave them a hard time. So you're telling us you have reconciliation issues, and now you're going to start reconciling the WIN Act. There are Central Valley Project Water District agencies that have significantly overpaid their WIN Act obligations. So the federal government's sitting on millions of dollars of it. And so they're very anxious to get it reconciled and get some of that money back. I think based on the report I had, we're like overpaid by maybe 1,000 or something in their books, but I think we're exactly paid up. So,
So you said we're paid up we're over 1,000, but you said we're paid up.
yep, we got the letter. I remember I put it in the packet a year or so ago from the federal government saying we no longer have any obligation.
Well, no, it's not her point.
If they owe us $1,000, we need to get it back.
When the reconciliation, and
You know, it's kind of like when you pay off a credit card, it's better to pay about 5 cents more than what you owe and pay it off and make them deal with the processing headache of getting the money back. And then I already reported to you the Friday morning, which was their report on the water year. But one thing I didn't mention before, I do have an updated charts back there of our reservoirs. But one thing that was interesting was that the North Sierra snowpack, even on January 31st, was 95% of normal. But the overall snowpack was 68% of normal. And for those of us that are kind of water geeks, it's a very ignored, but the #1 storage facility in the state of California is at snowpack. It's over on average year, it's 4 billion acre-feet of water that is perfectly timed to be stored when we don't need it in the middle of the raining and the snowing season, and to start melting in April and May and melt out through that period of time. But the Southern Sierras, who got walloped last weekend, really needed it. And the Southern Colorado Basin is way under the drought. So I thought maybe at this point, it would be great, even though it's at the end, if Director Fickus would like to give her update on the
Conference?
if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just have my notes here that
By the way, it's in your packet.
yeah, it's the
notes
last,
are in the back.
it's the last page. It wasn't as good as last year. Last year had the Klamath River where they were really talking about it, and they had some environmental people last year talking about the food for the Sacramento River and how it's helping the fish population with the runoff from the farms. That was just a great thing. So
Very cool.
yeah, that was so interesting. So this one of the big takeaways was, actually they had, Sacramento, Bee, reporter. And I didn't quite explain it in my sheet. So it's something that we could do here is invite a reporter out, because you don't see anything in the Record Searchlight, or maybe it's at Shasta Scout, but that they could, look at what we have and keep it to the forefront of our water. So even if you have problems or needing grants or something, that was just a good resource. So don't be afraid of reporters, ask them to come in. Some of it was, too techy and a little bit over my head. I think one of the bad things they were talking about were the fallow lands, and that people are putting in solar lands versus on land instead of farms. The other was, there was a couple of reservoirs that they're walking away from, that they can't increase. Or the one was that here you have a reservoir, it's right off, was it right off of I-5? And you're having to change highways. So if you're trying to raise the level of a reservoir, what's it entail? And you're having to move power lines and costs of this and that. So a lot of times they have to weigh then the cost of the reservoir, whether it is cost effective to raise that and gather more water. So I encourage you guys to go. It was, it's a good conference. It's a very good conference. Came home early because of the snow that we thought we were gonna get, which we did on Friday. So I was glad I came home Thursday night, so.
Well, it was an excellent decision by Director Fickus to leave on Thursday afternoon, as it was a couple other people that were coming back this way. I was actually going back on 80, so I didn't get out there until 10 o'clock to get this stuff. And so basically I took 3.5 hours to go, what normally takes an hour and a half because of the snow that was hitting Highway 80. I do want to just echo the couple comments. If the board's open, I think what we might want to do is sometime this summer, Pond 3 will be completed and operational, Pond 2 will be under construction. Might be an opportunity to get a tour of the community. I know you've already been out there, but it'd be fun to see the ponds, right? And see if we can get somebody from the newspapers out out there, take some pictures and do some reports.
TV.
And TV.
Nobody even reads newspapers.
Well, that's true.
I think all the
I
people,
do, I read the newspaper.
I love the newspaper.
all the people we had contacts for at KRCR when we were having all of our issues here, I think they're all gone.
And the Record Searchlight now prints down in Chico.
It's owned by US
Yeah,
today.
and it's, isn't it, yeah. So I think that was good. So that was something that that person talked about that I think was.
Actually, Chris Kellstrom had a big thing, and it was on Channel 7 about, it's the PG&E reservoirs that they're letting go. And with that, what they're letting go also is the hydroelectric part of it, because they don't want to do it anymore.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the other things that made last year kind of interesting was that, like, the Klamath Dam thing and finding out that they had, technically there was no water rights with them, it was all power, and the power regulatory weren't allowed, and blah, blah. So it was very, very, it's very interesting, I would encourage you to consider going, I'm glad. I will say there was one other little sort of techie thing that I sat in mainly so I could work, because they had good Wi-Fi, and it was all of the irrigation districts and talking about how they were putting flow meters in open ditches and how they were working on that. So what was really cool is somebody came up with a combination of that, and they had this sonogram thing that they would put on the outside of any pipe, metal, concrete, or anything, and they would put like 4 of them here and 4 of them here, and it was able to tell you how much it was a meter of the water.
Oh.
Interesting.
So I ran to get that, I mean, because you could use something like that, you know, that way you're not having to cut into the pipe to stick a mag meter or something like that.
Grant.
Yeah? Okay, we're running late. Operations report. Primarily want to point out to you the top line item here. As you know, we've been really scratching our head about how to deal with the accounts that this large number. And so Amity did a lot of research and trying to look at it and really found that there's $74,000 over 121 days. And of that, 55,000 of it are over 367 days, so over a year delinquent. So these are partial final bills. In other words, they've been sent to customers and they've moved and they're not paying. So we've got to look into getting a collections agencies to start on these, or potential lien process. So I think this report might be just a little bit more accurate than what we've had in the past.
Yeah, it was a level higher in the past.
Yeah. But again, you know, a lot of these 30 to 90 day ones, I mean, the last couple of months, we've averaged 50 to 55 shut-off notices. And in the end, we're only shutting off 3 to 8, sometimes 12 people, and then sometimes because somebody moved out and didn't tell anybody. But we did get a good customer utility management system training session. Since our kind of kerfluffle and challenges from the last billing, we've had very, very few this month. And those that we've had, we've resolved. You can see the water treatment plant operations report. I wanted to just mention, since Chair McVeigh had asked about it, and we didn't get it in this report. But I do have, since we gotta get ready to put in our requested schedule to the Bureau, I do have that since March of last year through January of this year, so we're last of our water years now, M&I, or domestic water, has been 2,297 acre feet. And our ag irrigation water has been 489 acre feet. So if you've been tracking this, treatment operations number, that would be what you would get for the total. Like, eventually we'll try to get that as a tracking number.
So we'll end up about 2,900 acre feet for this water year.
Yeah, and I think what is most significant is that, we've paid more attention to that. So, we have so many customers that are ag and domestic customers. And so during, especially winter time, most of the water they're using is actually domestic water or M&I water. So making sure that we kind of have a calculation that attributes that. Because if we can get to this 2350 number for M&I, that will help us in our historic M&I calculation when we go into a drought.
Yes.
Already gave you a little update on the distribution.
On the waste treatment plant,
Yeah,
Water treatment.
now we're talking about train 5 or filter number 7
yeah,
is not doing well. So filter 6 is offline. Filter 7 is back in use, but it's not performing well. And I thought filter 4 was not doing well.
right.
This doesn't sound good.
No, I think as Bill reported to me yesterday, he had not planned. Remember, last 2 years, he's put that media into the filters, and that's improved it. So one of the things, filter 7, he said that actually there wasn't a lot of media degradation, but the media bed, he was a little concerned about. But since even this writing, they've washed it, backflow it, and they think it's gonna be pretty operational for this coming year. He's also hopeful that, if we can get some people, while they're working on the ponds, he might try to get another exploration into train 6 and see if there's anything they can do sort of temporary to give it, like, even if it's 20% capacity, to see if it'll do some water. But yeah, I mean, the urgency of the PACE engineering report cannot be underestimated, and that's why we gotta get on it. And that's why I think having somebody to help us really spur down some grants is gonna be important.
Okay.
Any questions?
Oh, it was filter 8, not filter 6.
So, just standing committee, we're planning on an ag meeting on March 12th.
Turn that over to, Director
And,
Johnson.
talk to, Director Johnston, or Vice Chair, Johnston, and so March 12th, probably be focused, by the way, ag committee member, March 12th. And then, focus a little bit on reinvigorating our farmers market for this year. And then, we have some other subjects other than olives that we need to start working on for the ag committee. So just to report, the sort of breakaway olive association committee that Dennis Bosan, a community member on the committee, is working on, did have another meeting, and, they're trying to do stuff. Again, we're just here to let the facility get used and volunteer our time for that. And then the plan would be to have another meeting in April to maybe get somebody from UC Cooperative Extension or something, come in and talk about planting gardens, or just planting season, because we're in April and we're right there. And we have a neighbor right across the street that's gonna be planting a whole bunch of stuff, so we wanna make sure he's got his. So, those are that. We had a finance committee meeting February 12th. I've sent, yes.
Real quick, we talked about all of that being added to the newsletter. Just wanted to give you a reminder, I would like to see that on the school marquee as well. And then I did have a question, this being the first ag committee meeting of the year, do we need to re-select community
They need
committee
to
members?
reapply.
Yes.
Well, no, I think we, at last meeting, they were identified on the standing committee as community members.
Yes.
They have sent in notices that they're willing to serve for another year, as I reported. And so we hadn't had any other applications. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a 1 year.
Yeah.
No, we do have one position that we could potentially fill,
Yeah,
I would assume,
yeah.
so.
But it's on our website, and we added the newsletter for people to, we'd love to put somebody on a finance committee or on the other committees as well.
There are openings on both finance and planning and steering for community members.
I think, if Dr. Harl in particular, who hasn't been attending meetings as a community member, I mean, she's really interested in livestock, so I think if we can maybe schedule a meeting sometime middle of the year that's more livestock focused, I think we could get her engaged.
Fair enough.
Okay, as the committees, meet for the first time in the year, remember, you need to select a new chair of the committee. Finance committee, our new chair is Director Fickus.
Now, we have not had a planning and steering meeting yet. I have reached out to the 2 members and yet to come up with a date, but hopefully we'll get something in early April.
Questions?
Nope.
Future meetings, anything coming up for finance?
Nope, you just said probably April.
Water rates?
Yes, I think for the finance committee, we do need to look at something, second week of March.
Oh, in March.
Well, because I anticipate, that we'll get from the Bureau an initial allocation. We'll, probably in the next 3 days, we'll submit to the Bureau basically one of these, which is our schedule. And then in that, they will be giving us our rate sheet, our cost of service and all the rest of that stuff. So I think we want to sit down and talk about how do we get the usage rate figured out for the board.
Very good. Planning and steering? Anything?
We're gonna schedule something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
meeting in April.
All right, very good. Anything else? Any board member items?
Not me.
No? Anything from the audience before we?
Just real quick though, Director Fickus, there is something there that was for the board member item. She covered it under the gym report, so just to acknowledge it was there, it was on the agenda.
If there be nothing else, then we adjourn this meeting at 8:37.